she used to wake up before the sun. It wasn't discipline, any more just habit, the kind that lingers even when the reasons fade. Her hands knew where the kettle was, where the teacup waited, where the silence began. For years, Martha had lived inside that silence. After her husband Peter passed, she told everyone she was fine. The word fine became her armor. It fit too easily, like a coat that hides the shiver underneath. The house had kept his scent longer than she expected. Old wood, pipe smoke, and rosemary. Even now, when she walked past his chair, she could almost hear him clearing his throat to say something ordinary, something like, "It's a good day for the garden." But the garden had died. Not all at once, just slowly, like she had. The soil cracked, vines turned brittle, and weeds took over the corners where roses once grew. She stopped tending to it the same month. She stopped answering the phone. Grief is strange that way. It doesn't arrive like thunder. It settles quietly and convinces you that the stillness is safety. One morning, she found an envelope in the mail that wasn't for her. The address was smudged, the name unreadable. Inside was a child's drawing a house, a tree, and a bright yellow sun with a smile. On the bottom corner, it said in crayon, "To Grandma, from Leo." Martha didn't know any Leo, but she placed the drawing on her refrigerator anyway. It was the first color her kitchen had seen in years. A few days later, there was a knock at her door. A woman stood outside, holding a small boy by the hand. "I think our mail got mixed," the woman said. "This belongs to you." She held out another envelope, this one addressed correctly. Martha smiled awkwardly. "And the drawing?" The woman laughed. "That's my son's. He sends one to my mother every week." Then she looked at Martha's porch, at the dusty flower pots and empty bird feeder. She hesitated. "Would you like him to leave one for you next time too?" Martha almost said no. But the boy looked up with eyes full of questions and no fear. So she nodded. Maybe just one. That evening, she sat on her porch with the drawing on her lap. The paper glowed under the setting sun. She noticed how the colors made her walls look less gray. For the first time in years, she thought about buying seeds again. The next morning, she walked to the garden. Weeds had claimed the soil, but there was still a single sprout pushing through a crack. She knelt beside it and whispered, "You're braver than me." She dug her fingers into the dirt. The earth was dry, but it remembered her touch. When the watering can emptied, she refilled it. And when her knees hurt, she stayed anyway. Pain had become part of her rhythm. Maybe it could be part of her healing to dot the boy. Leo began visiting on Saturdays with his mother. He'd run to the garden shouting, "How's it growing?" Every week, she'd tell him the same thing, better than last time. And it was true. They planted sunflowers first because, as Leo said, they don't care if you forget sometimes. They still reach up. Each visit, laughter returned a little louder. Each seed buried was a memory forgiven. One day, as they watered together, Leo looked up and asked, "Did you always like flowers?" She hesitated. "I used to. My husband planted them. What happened to him?" The boy asked. She smiled softly. He taught the sun how to shine. Then he went to make sure it never stopped. Leo didn't understand completely, but he nodded as if he did. He placed a small blue stone beside the roses. For him, he said. That night, she cried not from sadness, but because someone had remembered to include him. Summer arrived. The garden transformed from a memory into a map of the present. Neighbors stopped by again. Someone left a basket of peaches on her porch with a note that said, "For the lady with the sunflowers." She laughed. For years, she had tried to disappear quietly. And now the world had decided to notice her again. Yet healing isn't a straight line. One afternoon, while pruning, she found Peter's old gloves buried under the soil. They were stiff, still holding the shape of his hands. She pressed them to her chest and whispered, "I thought I lost you here." Then she heard her own voice answer, "No, you just stopped looking." She wasn't sure if she said it or if the wind did. Either way, it was enough. That evening, she brewed 2 cups of tea and set one across from her. "Old habits," she said aloud. She talked softly into the quiet, telling him about the boy, the flowers, the laughter that was growing again. And somewhere between sentences, she realized she was smiling. The cup across from her stayed full, but the steam that rose from it looked alive. For years, she had avoided that chair. Now she spoke to it freely. The words didn't echo, they settled, like seeds landing where they were always meant to fall. "I'm learning again," she whispered. "Not how to live without you, but how to live with what you left behind." Outside, rain began to fall soft, steady, like an answer. She opened the door and let it wash across the garden. The flowers bowed, but did not break. Morning came with the smell of wet earth. Martha stepped barefoot into the yard. The world felt clean, rinsed of the dust that memory leaves behind. She looked at the fence. A single vine had climbed higher than the rest. A yellow blossom opened to face the sun. She smiled. "Show off," she said, and the word came out as laughter. A week later, Leo brought a box of tiny bulbs. "Mom says these grow in the snow," he told her. "They're stubborn. Like you." She laughed again, a sound that no longer startled her. They planted together while his mother took pictures from the porch. When he left, he said, "Don't forget to water them." She promised she wouldn't. But she also knew that some things now watered themselves: the air, the tears. The quiet joy of remembering without pain. As summer slipped into autumn, she began leaving her gate unlocked. Neighbors would step in to look at the garden. Some left notes or seeds in return. A retired carpenter offered to fix her fence. The young woman from next door painted her mailbox. The world, it seemed, had been waiting for an invitation. Martha started writing down their names in a notebook, titled "Things That Bloomed Back." Every name was a color. Every gesture, a petal. One afternoon, Leo brought a school assignment. "We have to write about someone who changed something," he said. She asked, "What did you change?" He grinned. "I changed your garden. Then, quieter, you changed me." He ran off before she could answer. She stood there, with his words fluttering in the air like butterflies that had just found sunlight. Winter arrived softly that year. She wrapped the garden with burlap and straw, whispering, "Rest well, my loves." Inside, she kept a small pot on the windowsill with one stubborn green shoot. Each morning she touched it lightly, as if checking a pulse. Snow fell outside, thick and slow. She sat with her notebook and wrote, "Healing isn't loud. It's the sound of soil softening after frost." Months later, the first snow melted. The ground glistened. When she stepped into the yard, new shoots were already reaching through the mud. They had survived without her hands for a while, and somehow, that felt right. Healing, she realized, is when things no longer depend on your control to keep growing. She opened the gate wider and hung a small wooden sign, "Community Garden. Take what you need. Leave what you can." That summer, strangers came. Some planted herbs, others painted stones with names. Children chased butterflies between rows of color. Martha sat beneath the oak tree, watching life return through every hand that touched the soil. She didn't try to own it. She simply belonged again. One evening, as the sky turned gold, she found Leo waiting by the gate with a letter. "It's from my grandmother," he said. "She wanted me to tell you she loves your garden." Martha opened it. Inside was a pressed flower sun yellow, perfect. The letter said only one line: "Thank you for being the proof that time can bloom again." She closed her eyes and breathed in the scent of soil and sunlight. In that moment, she knew Peter would have loved this. He had always believed in beginnings disguised as endings. When everyone left, she walked to the center of the garden. The air shimmered with evening light. She whispered, "I finally kept something alive." Then she laughed softly. And it wasn't the plant, it was me. Later that night, she wrote one last entry in her notebook. "If grief is the winter of love, then healing is the spring of memory. And both deserve their season." She closed the book and set it beside the lamp. Outside, crickets sang a choir of small things declaring survival. She fell asleep to their rhythm, her window open to the night breeze that smelled of mint and rain. By morning, the first visitors arrived, again neighbors, carrying watering cans, children holding seeds. Someone asked, "Mrs. Martha, where should we start today?" She pointed to a patch near the fence and said, "Anywhere. Everything grows when you begin." The laughter that followed spread across the yard, through the air, into the open street. And for the first time since Peter's passing, the house no longer echoed, it breathed.